This is your host Yannick Oho Bambe, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am more than the immigrant that you had in mind, a platform on which stories that explore the identity and experiences of immigrants and refugees coming to Canada will be told on a regular basis. Today, as always, we have another special guest, very special guest, Siavash Madani, aka the rider of the Black Horse, and we are welcoming him. Welcome.
Thank you, Yannick.
How are you today?
Good. I'm doing well. It's been a busy week, but we're here towards the end of it, so excited.
Awesome. So let's get right into it. So could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Siavash Madani. I'm an interior designer here in Victoria, BC. I'm 42 years old, and I originally come from Iran.
Okay. So, all right, you originally come from Iran. So how long have you been in Canada?
I've been in Canada since 2001.
Okay. Yeah. That's quite a long time.
Yeah, it feels like it.
Okay, and so what were the reasons why you chose Canada? Would you say, let me ask two questions in one, right? Mm-hmm. First, the reason why you chose Canada, and the second is, were there any other options other than Canada? Did you have any other options as far as places where you could have gone?
Right. I think there were probably options, but I was a teenager when my dad decided to apply for Canadian immigration and bring me and my brother here for better opportunities and sort of more security. Iran has never been a safe environment for people that are not following the rules, not just the rules, but not following the principles of the Islamic Republic. So anybody that can tries to get out. In fact, when I was 8 years old, my family immigrated to Australia, and that was a failed attempt. If I was to analyze it, I would say probably enough research wasn't done before embarking on that journey. But it ended up, I ended up going back with my father to Iran after about 3.5 years. My mom stayed in Australia for a little bit longer, but I think the hardship kind of drive the wedge between the two of them, and it ended up eventually into separation and their divorce. But that's another story for another time. But what I'm trying to get at is that most people are trying to get out of Iran post-revolution, especially the ones that have experienced the liberal, the freedoms that they had in under the previous regime. And the revolution kind of it limited the freedoms of people, and there wasn't really a lot of room and opportunities for growth for people that are not associated with the regime. And there you are. That's why the family decided to immigrate to Canada.
Awesome. Well, I hear, three words that kind of like that I heard you say and that you repeated: security, safety, freedom as well.
Freedom, stability, that's also another one. There's lots of buzzwords in there.
Yeah, sure. And you also say that you are 43 now.
42.
42, yeah. And you moved in 2001.
Yes.
So that's like roughly you were 17, 18 when you came here?
I was 19, so it's over half that I've been in Canada.
Sure.
So I'm more Canadian than I am Iranian.
Absolutely, no doubt about it. And so how was the reception when you came here in Canada from, let's say, the Canadian population in general? I want to say the indigenous population in Canada. But
right.
Yeah.
When I moved here, I was in Toronto, and I wasn't really aware of my surroundings. Most of the people that I interacted with on a daily basis were either white that were born in Canada or living in Canada for a long time, and there was obviously the immigrant population that was in Toronto as well, and it's still huge and thriving. But I think most parts of Canada are like this, and most parts of the world actually. People that immigrate from a certain culture and background kind of create these little, not gathering spots, but there are neighborhoods that they gravitate towards, and they sort of gravitate towards each other. So, I mean, back to your original question, the reception was pretty warm and open. I've had very good experiences. I'd say probably on the West Coast it's a little bit warmer. Okay. Toronto was, on average, I would say was a normal level of warm. And I also lived in Quebec, Montreal for about 13 years of that span. So I got to experience different places. If I were to rate them on warmth, I would say Quebec is probably the least warm, and then Ontario, and then British Columbia is the warmest.
Does it have to do with the weather as well?
Possibly. I mean, I am a believer of the fact that, you know, wherever the weather is nicer, people are nicer too. So I would say that the weather definitely affects that for sure.
Okay. No, I mean, well, that's a theory. Well,
yeah, I subscribe to that theory.
And so let's also talk about, so you're coming to Canada, the reception, and also integration into Canadian society, because you mentioned also previously that was one of your biggest challenge, right? So can you talk to us a little bit about that aspect of your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no two ways about it. When you immigrate to a new country or even move to a new city, you're an outsider, and you know it's tough. A lot of that pressure is probably self-inflicted, just because you feel different, you have different experiences from the people that have grown up in that city or in that community, and it's natural that you are kind of you think twice about the reception that you get. But aside from that, I mean, it wasn't an unwelcoming reception, if you can call it that. You know, you're a small grain of sand into a big beach, if you will, that is all these other little grains are doing their business and they're getting blown away by wind or by the waves, and you know, you try to integrate as best you can in that chaos, if you will. Okay. So yeah, did I answer your question?
No, absolutely. But I would like you to go a little bit deeper with that and go into the stories, because obviously this is a storytelling platform, right? So I would like you to share a few stories if you don't mind.
Of course, no, not at all. When I came to Canada, it was actually September 18th, 2001. So a week after September 11th. Okay. The world was the timing was kind of, you know, unbelievable. The first thing that came to my mind when I was watching the news when 9/11 happened was like, okay, this is I don't know what to expect going there. But yeah, it was relatively smooth. I mean, you know, there was security checks everywhere in the airports. Each airport that I think I flew through Frankfurt. I can't remember exactly. I believe it was Frankfurt. So Tehran, Frankfurt, and then Toronto. And security checks before boarding the plane, after getting off the plane. It was like, as if you can do something on the it was interesting. And then, well, that was different because I had traveled before, and you know, it was very different. The world was in shock still. But yeah, I came to Toronto, landed in Toronto, got through without a hitch. My uncle had a larger family than our family. So he had this is my father's brother. He had 4 children that were already kind of established. They had come to Toronto I'd say about 9 months before I arrived, and they had rented an apartment in Hyde Park area, and I basically went to their place. I crashed there for about 3 weeks. A couple of them, the twins, they had a job at a McDonald's nearby, and I was looking. When I left Iran, I told my parents, they were separated, but I told both of them that I want to stand on my own feet, and I don't want any money from them. I came here with very minimal money, and so my cousins basically were working at this McDonald's in Toronto. And they suggested I start there because there's already an in, there's a connection. So I made a resume and I applied, and I got the job. Surprise! And shortly after I started, because obviously I had nothing else to do, that was what I was doing. I got offered a management position, so I basically climbed the whatever ladder of a McDonald's chain.
Oh, wow.
And I continued to work there as a manager. It was interesting because I was trying to settle in, and I got to make some friends. And when I left Iran, I was a university student in civil engineering, but because I knew I was moving to Canada, I wasn't taking my studies seriously. So I didn't really have any credits from my education in Iran. I was a first-year student anyway. And civil engineering was not really something that I wanted to study. A little bit of background might help here. In Iran, they have sort of like a national examination that before you apply to university, you need to take this exam. And before you take the exam, you need to select programs in various universities in the country, and you get maybe, I can't remember right now, maybe 3 or 5 choices.
Okay.
Based on your score and based on the number of people applied to those programs that you've selected and their scores, you get ranked to get accepted to that program or not. Okay. So it's a pretty rigorous program, and this would work if it was fair, but obviously if you have connections or if you were part of a family that has, lost someone in the war. There was an 8-year war between Iran and Iraq. You get special treatment, so you get that score is for you is boosted, and you'll get ahead of people that actually have better scores. Okay. Not that I have a very good score at this point. So, I got into this program, and I wasn't really interested in it, but because of mandatory conscription in Iran, if you're a student, you can sort of leave a little bit of a deposit and get out of the country at this time. Right now it's different. So this is back in 2001. So I had to remain a student to be able to get out of the country, essentially. Okay. And once you leave, if you don't go back, you lose that deposit. Okay. I started working, and I became a manager shortly after, and I didn't know what I wanted to study. I knew that I needed to get into university and get some education to be able to thrive and get ahead of myself in this society anywhere in the world. I was always brought up with typical parents. You got to be an engineer, a doctor, something. Yeah. You can't just not do what we want you to do. Higher education was always on the plans. Okay. So one of my fellow managers at that McDonald's at the time was studying at a college in Toronto that was affiliated with York University, and they were offering a program. I believe it was a 2-year program, and it was called the General Arts and Science Program. So it was basically Gen Eds for 4 semesters, with no specialization, just general education. Okay. And this would bring you to a level that you would be accepted into York University as either a business major or I can't remember the other major, but but business was the one that I selected. Okay. I studied for about 3 semesters, good marks in the beginning, starting with like towards the end of the second semester I lost interest because, you know, it's boring stuff. Some of it has good applications, you know, there was logic in there was critical thinking, those were nice courses. But anyway, towards the end of this third semester, I was like, I can't do it. This is not me. It isn't anyone really. So I said I need to take some time and figure out what it is that I need to do. I basically left school, didn't finish my third semester, and I started. I think at this time I was working at a security company and I was a field supervisor. So I had night shifts. And I would get in a company car, go to different sites that we had guards in, make sure everything is in order, they're wearing their ties, their shoes are polished. And, you know, when they called in sick, somebody had to cover until we find a replacement. So all of that background work was basically what I was doing. And I guess I'm having a realization now that I listened to a lot of radio at the time. And so I started working at this radio station in Toronto after that. It was an Iranian radio. Okay. It was in Farsi, the programming, and it was a private radio station, so it wasn't on any of the AM or FM or SW waves, the shorter waves. Mm-hmm. It was mostly an internet radio, and you had to buy the device to be able to receive it, essentially. Okay. It wasn't that expensive. It was like $60 or so at the time. So I started working at this radio station in the basically what they call the control room. Mm-hmm. So it was mostly production, and at the same time I decided that sound engineering is an interesting avenue to explore. Okay. So I went back to that college and I said, listen, this is what's going on. I think I have an interest in sound engineering. What kind of programs do you have that might work for me or get me to where I want to be? They had an electronics, not exactly in engineering, but it was an electronics program with a deviation towards sound engineering. So I start there, I'm working at the radio station. Again, another 3 semesters go by and I lose interest. It wasn't my thing. But I'm doing well at the radio station at this time. I run a couple of shows. I mean, the shows are mostly paid programming by professionals, Iranian professionals in the city, and you know, I hosted a few shows, interviewing them essentially. You know, a couple of shows a week kind of thing, but I was mostly in the production room. So I decided sound engineering is not where I want to be. It's a little too technical. It's too much engineering. Mm-hmm. So I pulled out of that program, and then I went to a counselor at the college. And I said, listen, this is what's going on. I'm growing old. I think I was in my late 20s at this point. I don't know what to do. I need to do something with my life. The guidance counselor was very understanding of my situation, and they had a multiple choice test that was, it took approximately about 8 hours.
That's a pretty long.
Yeah. It was, and it's a personality test. So okay. They administered that. They said, you know, we have this. Why don't you try this? And it'll tell you a few options. It'll give you a few options of what lines up with your personality. Mm-hmm. So, you know, having no other choice at this point, I'm like, okay, I'll do it. Mm-hmm. Did the test. I can't remember what rank 2 and 3 were, but the first one was architecture, and as you know, most architecture schools require a portfolio. I had no artistic background before then. I mean, my mom was a painter. She painted as a hobby, and that was my only exposure. We did some projects together, but nothing major. So I looked around the architecture field and tried to see what else I can do. I looked at a lot of architecture schools, and like I said, they needed a portfolio and a body of work to support your interest. The next best thing was interior design, and most interior design schools at the time required a portfolio as well. So I found this school in Montreal that didn't require a portfolio. I thought it's interesting. I traveled to Montreal from Toronto. It was like a 6-hour drive. And I had a couple of friends in Montreal as well, so it was like a day or two trip. Went to the school, met with the administration, looked at all the conditions, and I told them what I've done so far. I had my transcripts. I didn't need them, but I had them. And they said, yeah, you can apply. You feel it looks like you're a good fit. So I applied and I got accepted, and it was, I believe, just before September, August of 2007, that I moved from Toronto to Montreal to go to school. And as soon as I started my interior design education, it was like a light had turned on somewhere. It felt right. Throughout high school, I had a big decline in my grades and my interest level in studies in general, and this was after many years for the first time that I was happy about studying. I was excited about the homework that I had, and the work that I needed to do with my projects. So I felt definitely something is pulling me towards this, and I pursued it. I followed through. It was a rigorous program. There was 3 groups that started in my year, and by the end of the program there was only 1 remaining, so there was a lot of dropouts. Of course, interior design is something that a lot of people think they can do it, and they gravitate towards it, but it is technical. It's not as technical as sound engineering or medicine, but there's a lot of little things that people don't think of. So yeah, I basically finished that course. I graduated with honors, and it was very smooth. It was hard work, but I enjoyed every single bit of it. It was the first time in my life that I was finishing projects before they were due, and then I was helping others. So it was a lot of fun, and again, hard work too. And obviously, because of my background and the pressure, I had this ingrained in my head that you can't just do something with a college diploma. You gotta pursue this. You gotta take it further. I was able to find a school, and this is through the teachers I had in my program in Montreal. I found a school in Florence, Italy that accepted this 3-year condensed program that I had just taken as a bachelor's degree, and they had a master's course. So I would basically go to that school, finish another condensed program, and walk away with a master's degree in interior design. And I thought, well, Florence, Italy is, it's a city that 75% of Renaissance art is there. It's where you would go to learn a lot about this field. So I took a chance. I went to Italy. I applied for the school first. I got the acceptance. I applied for visa. I got my visa.
First thing first.
Exactly. Right? I followed protocol. Didn't just get on a plane and go to Italy. I basically did, and I wasn't alone. There was another student, a friend of mine, which is a colleague now. She's not in Canada anymore, but he was also in the same program as me, in the same group. And we traveled to Italy together. We signed up at the same school, essentially, and we went to that school. And I actually had another good friend of mine that he joined us a semester later. So we had a good group over there. Again, everything went really smooth. It was tough, but it was beautiful. I mean, I can't complain about my time in Florence. Good food, good art, everything was beautiful. And the school was great too. I finished that program and came back to Montreal. I really wanted to stay in Florence, but it was tougher to integrate there than it is here in Canada. So yeah, I came back to Montreal, started looking for work. I knew in the back of my mind that there's a qualification called the NCIDQ, which is basically a professional exam for interior designers.
Okay.
And I knew that this, even before going to Italy, I knew that this was the sort of a landmark, that once you achieve this, a lot of doors open for you in the field of interior design. It wasn't really a big thing at the time in Quebec. There was only 5 people that had this certification in Quebec. It's been around for a longer time in BC and Ontario and other provinces. Quebec was one of the last to adopt this, as usual. Nothing against Quebec, it's just they're still around these things. So I reached out to those 5 people. 3 of them were retired. One of them didn't really respond to me, and there was one that got back to me and said, and the way to take this exam is, at the time, you needed to have a sponsor which is certified,
Okay.
or an architect, and you would have to, with each education path has different number of experience hours that you need to fulfill before you qualify to sit for the exam. Mine was about 5.5 years that I needed to, like, in terms of hours, once you add them up, it was about 5.5 years. And they were prescribed in different areas of interior design. So I reached out to this person, and he got back to me, and we actually had a good chat in person. I went to their office, and he knew exactly what was required because he had the certification. And he said, at this time, I don't have an internship or any need for someone, but I'll keep your resume in mind and on file, and I'll reach out to you when I have the need. And sure enough, about a month and a half later, he contacted me, asked me if I'm still available. I said yes, and I started interning at his office. It was him and his partner. They had gone to school together, started a small boutique interior design studio in Montreal, doing mostly high-end residential and a few commercial projects. And that was basically the start of my career. That's how it kicked off. And of course, he was sort of a mentor, so I was always aiming towards me gaining the education, the experience to be able to sit for that exam, which is another rigorous exam. It was a 3-part exam, one on professional practice, one on fundamentals of interior design, and there was actually, at the time, there was a hand-drawn exam, an 8-hour exam of 4 different segments.
But you don't take anything that's less than 8 hours, right?
Well, the other 2, the fundamentals and the professional exam, those are 4 hours, but they were at the time administered in the same day. Okay. So it adds up to 8 hours actually. But they were multiple choice. So yeah, I took the exam, and I passed, and at this time, they were, before I took the exam, the partners that I was working with, that partnership kind of fell apart. It has its own drama and its own story, but that's for another time. While that was happening, the drama was unfolding, there was no work at the company, obviously, court orders, not pretty stuff. So I took some time off, and I studied for the exam, and by this time I had enough experience that I could sit for the exam. So I applied for the exam on the side, and then studied, went and passed the exam, and that basically opened a whole other door for me for opportunities. I found, after I graduated and basically got my certification, I was approached by the Association of Professional Interior Designers of Quebec to sit on their board of directors, because obviously there wasn't many certificate holders in Quebec. At the time, I think at this point there was like 25 or 30. And they didn't have anyone that's qualified on the board of directors of the association that governs this in Quebec.
Oh, okay.
So they approached me, and I, of course, accepted. So I was serving on the board of directors, and I also found a job at a studio that focused on retail design. Very well-known studio in Montreal. lots of retail projects under the belt, lots of awards, and I worked there for about 2 years, and then I skipped the part that I got married.
Well, it's fine, because I mean, I was going to interject, because actually your story, what you just shared with us, what it brings to mind is that, because so often, because we started talking about integration,
Yes.
and we kind of shifted into, I would say
Professional.
but I would say much more even specific than professional. Purpose. Purpose. I hear purpose. You
Right.
know, finding your purpose, and so we started because this project is also about taking the immigrant outside of the box
Sure.
they are usually put in, right? And from listening to you, what I'm getting is that your journey is just a journey of any regular person who's just trying to find their
Right.
purpose, and who eventually, you know, after going through different turns,
Yeah,
and you
I
know,
was shoulder
Yeah,
sliding all sides of the
absolutely.
box trying to get out of it.
absolutely, yeah, you know, and just at some point getting into that interior design, and finding, you know,
My calling.
your calling and your
Yeah.
purpose.
I think the thing that I'm most proud of is finding that calling and following it, and continuing to pursue that path. That it's giving me purpose, and it's driving me forward. Family has never been the thing that drives me. I never wanted to have kids. I don't have kids. So yeah, that's the main thing for me is professionally finding what I'm passionate about and following that. That's what's the main driver.
So let's go a little bit further into the storytelling, and so now that would you say that, would you associate, so I want to ask you about the sense of belonging, and I want to ask you about what the notion of home, what does home mean for you, right? But since we've started talking about purpose, I want to ask you if you would associate belonging, purpose, home. I mean, I don't know if you see where I'm trying to go with this. So if for you, for example, having a sense of belonging to a place is pretty much tied to finding your calling as well. I mean, would that be fair? Would that be?
I think it's a fair assessment. Yeah. I have moved around a lot in my life. I probably skipped over some of it in my long storytelling, but I'd say every 3 or 4 years, ever since I was a child, we moved.
Okay.
Not just moving from this home to another home, cities, countries. So there was a lot of mobility, and I've thought about this a lot. Wherever I live and I settle down, obviously it's somewhere comfortable that I feel like home.
Okay.
And it immediately triggers something in me that becomes my home, and I try to grow roots and settle down. So 3 years ago when I came, it's over 3 years now, just over 3 years, that I came to Victoria, that was my intention, and I think it's happening, you know. I got a condo, I have my home, and I've settled down. This feels like home. I have my job.
So okay, let me try to rephrase. What would you say is the main factor that would attract you to a place? Would that be professional? Would that be, or so what was there like a pull that kind of like brought you here to Victoria?
Well, it's a beautiful place to be. I think it's always it's always a balance with me.
Okay.
Like there needs to be a few different factors, and they need to add up even I don't sit down and write them down, or I don't make lists,
Mhm.
but in my head there's always a few different things that make that place that I'm planning to go to and stay for a while a viable solution. Not necessarily because there's a problem where I am and I'm trying to get away from it, but it's the next step in my grand plan, which is not written. It just feels right. I'll give you an example from my the first job in that boutique firm that I was working with. They had this. It was probably early. I'd say it was around 2012. There was this rush of Western interior designers going to China for work. And this firm wanted to establish a foothold in China, Shanghai being a more popular place after Hong Kong. And they engaged this talent agency to find a position over there with a potential firm. And they did find a position eventually after about 6 or 9 months. And I was selected to go and represent them over there. And I really packed everything that I needed to take with me. I, very quickly, within a matter of a couple of weeks, figured out what I need to put in storage and what I need to get rid of, and just, lighten the load, if you will. So the planning process was really quick, and I was able to do it, and that was my intention, to go there and stay there and work. Again, that's the work side of it, taking me there. But I was open for I think the fact that I moved a lot during my life and the sensation of being in a new place, I think that's my biggest driver. The sensation that you're walking around in streets that you don't know, looking at people that you don't know, trying to figure out how to survive, how to figure things out, how to become part of that fabric of that society. That's what's really driven me, and that's what gives me the most excitement when I go to a new place to stay, not just for vacation. But even then, like, the most enjoyable thing for me on vacation is to just stick my hands in my pocket, walk around on the street and observe and learn. So that is, I would say that's the biggest driving force, and it's something that excites me every time that the sparks are flying when I know I'm going somewhere new. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because eventually one wants to establish somewhere and set roots, and just, which I think and I hope Victoria is that place. Did that?
Yeah, but that's
getting closer.
No, getting closer. That's why I was my initial question was about maybe tying it with the sense of doing something that is worthwhile to you, right? Maybe finding a place where you feel alive because of what you're doing, professionally, and so that's why I was trying to ask you if it would be fair to say that, or to associate the notion of home with finding your calling and finding your purpose. Because also the reason why I'm also asking that is because since we're here, before we leave, I would like you to do two things. First, think about your younger self, right? What kind of advice you would have given to him, and secondly, also give a word of advice. It seems like you kind of were able to accidentally find a sort of blueprint to finding our calling, right? I want you to give you also advice to maybe some young people and some young listeners who might listen to this podcast on, how to go about finding their calling and to follow their calling and their passion. So whichever way you want to answer this question, you can answer the first one or the second one, and you can just answer them both at the same time.
I kind of forgot the first one, so I'll answer the second one first.
Okay.
And then we'll go back to the first one. I mean, I don't think I'm the ideal person to tell people how to find their calling, but I actually remember the first question. Creative minds, they're all over the place.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you just have to poke around and find it. You have to listen to what your mind wants and pursue what it wants to find out. And don't bind yourself to social norms, or I mean there are some social norms you need to bind yourself to, obviously, but you know, just because your parents say you need to be a doctor and they want you to be a doctor, or they want you to be a surgeon, or they want you to be a dentist, or they want you to be that, whatever. Think about what drives you, what lights the fire inside of you, what makes you happy, and find something related to that. That's usually a good spot to start. But again, I didn't find that myself. I had to do that 8-hour multiple choice test, the personality test. Use the resources that is around you. If I was in Iran and I was at the same impasse when I went to my counselor in the college and said, hey, I don't know what to do, I don't think there would have been a solution that's not available. That's part of the reason why I came to Canada, because those opportunities are not available. Use the tools that you have around you, and there's plenty of them. School guidance counselor is one example, but there's many opportunities, especially in the school system today. I see kids doing job shadows. You know, if it interests you, figure out how you can go and do a shadow and just, you know, take a couple of days following a person that's doing the job that you think is what you want to do, and just familiarize yourself with it. See if it does anything for you. If it does, pursue it a little bit more and see if that's the thing you want to do. Don't just go, you know, just because you're following what they tell you to do.
Yeah.
Find out for yourself. Explore. Get out there. I think that's the best advice I can give someone to find their calling. It's just, again, the resources are all over and around you. Find them, use them, figure it out.
Nice. And would you give that advice to your 19-year-old self? The same advice? Starting. I
mean, yeah, that's what made me find what I wanted to do. But if I had aligned to the person that took that exam to myself when I took that exam and looked at the results, and the first one was architecture, I would say follow that. Build yourself a portfolio. It's not too late. Just because you're 27 or whatever age I was at the time, it's not too late to follow what is your calling. I mean, knowing that I've done interior design and I love it and I'll do it for the rest of my life, but it would have been different if it was architecture. And I think just judging by the way I look at problems in my professional field, I think I had the potential. And that would be the advice that I give my younger self, which was your first question, right?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Yeah, we're getting back right back into it. So now moving on to the end of our conversation, which was actually a fascinating conversation. I mean, we could just, you know, stay forever and just continue this conversation. But I want to talk about your name, right? And, you know, some of the listeners, as I was introducing you,
sure,
they noticed that I gave you like an AKA
right.
Rider of the Black Horse. So I want to go to Iran for a second, and to Iran poetry and literature. First of all, I would like you to tell us a little bit about your name, just a quick summary about what it means.
Sure.
And And well, I just let you do that first, and then I'll ask you a follow-up question after that.
Yeah. My name is Siavash. It's a name from an old Persian legend. So before the country was called Iran, it's an ancient Iranian poet. His name is Ferdowsi, and his book of poetry is basically describing epic battles, and it's a series of kings and their stories and the heroes, the knights that fought for these kings. Siavash is not one of the knights, but he is a personality in the story, and he is the son of a king that I believe is accused of sleeping with his stepmom, and his trial turns out to be he needs to pass through fire with his horse.
Oh, right. Okay.
And his horse is black, and he is the rider of the black horse. He passes through the fire unscathed, and that means that he is not lying, and he didn't sleep with his stepmom. So that is, I mean, these old ancient legends are, you know.
Okay.
So that's what he's known for. He's the truthful. He's a truthful person, and he's the rider of the black horse that passed through fire.
Nice.
Yeah.
So did he succeed in that test of the fire test? I mean,
I haven't tried it yet. I have burned myself with dishes from the oven trays multiple times. So I don't think I can pass through fire.
No, but would it be fair to say that you've sort of passed through fire of or some fires in your journey?
I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
I've passed through the trials that I've been through. Not all of them were passed in the best way that could have been passed. Obviously, you know, you face problems when you face them, and you make the decisions in the moment as you make them, and when you look back, you realize that there could have been better ways that you tackled them. But this is life. You live and you learn from your experiences, and you move on, and you try to use what you learned in your past experiences for your future encounters. And I think I'm, you know, if I can say so myself, I'm doing a good job of that.
No, I mean, I can definitely. I mean, your story, like I said, has been very inspiring, and it's absolutely fascinating to have you and to speak with you, to talk, to converse with you. Thank you. I was going to ask you to leave us with some words of wisdom.
Ooh.
any thoughts, or even better, I have a better idea. If you have some, just like a few lines of that of the poem from.
I don't have any lines of that poem.
Yeah,
it's a big book, and it's been translated. It's called the Shahnameh, which is basically literal translation is the letter of the kings. But it's
just like a short, brief passage, just a few words. We can definitely.
I'll
make
do the
that
words
happen.
of wisdom.
The words of
that's
wisdom.
easier to do.
Right.
I would say follow your dreams, follow your passion. Don't get bogged down by any distractions. Just pursue what it is that you think you need to pursue in your life, and do your best. And no matter where you get, don't judge yourself in a negative light. No matter what you do, it could have always been worse. No matter where you are and what stage of your life, just know that it could have been worse. And there are a lot of people that are envious of where you are and what you are doing. That's the words of wisdom that I would tell people. it's hard to kind of bring yourself back and sit down and listen to that voice. But I find that whenever I'm down or I'm thinking this is not where I want to be, I could have been better, whenever you think negatively of where you are and what you're doing, I think it always helps to kind of pull yourself outside of the box and just look around you. Look at the majority of the people that you know or you see, and you'll realize that you're not in such a bad place. It could be worse.
Awesome. Wow, that was so good, my man. I don't think there's much more to say apart from I had a great time. I hope you guys also had a great time listening to this conversation today with my man, the one and only Siavash, the rider of the Black Horse.
Thank you so much.
Helping us and giving us wisdom, inspiring us, and I just want to leave you with with one thought. We are all bigger and stronger than any trial and any fire that life can throw at us. So let's just go through it and go and become the best version of ourselves and the best people that we can be. So thank you very much for listening, and stay tuned for more on this series of podcasts produced by the Intercultural Association of Greater Victoria, with funding from the Department of Canadian Heritage.